perspective now from someone with firsthand experience serving as National Security Advisor for President Trump and experience being ousted by him, John Bolton, who held that role in the first Trump administration, and as we mentioned, also served as U.S. Ambassador to the UN years earlier, which is what Mike Waltz will be nominated for. Ambassador, good to have you on. Obviously, representing the U.S. at the UN is an important job. Do you believe Vice President Vance, his claim that Mike Waltz is leaving his job not because of the signal scandal, but because the White House wanted to promote him?
Of course not. I mean, I think it really just shows how little about national security J.D. Vance knows. If you took 100 people anywhere in this country who know anything about national security, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, and asked them objectively, do you think National Security Advisor or UN Ambassador is the more important job? I will bet a small amount, I will bet a large amount of money that 90 out of 100, if not 99 out of 100, would say National Security Advisor is the more important job.
By the way, you have a lot of credibility on this, given that you've held both of these positions. So in your opinion, having been the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, you say the National Security Advisor is a more important job.
I don't think there's any question about it. I love being UN ambassador. Don't get me wrong, yeah. but it doesn't compare. I think what Caitlin Collins just said about Trump making the decision this morning is interesting. That was my sense, that this news that Waltz was imminently on his way out. Not that he was just a dead man walking and would go maybe in August or at some point, so that nobody could claim Trump had bowed to media or Democratic political pressure, and somehow it took on a life of its own, and Trump wanted to find a way to ease the passage. They had a vacancy given Elise Stefanik's nomination had been pulled, and somebody said, maybe Trump himself, hey, why don't we give the UN job to Mike Waltz? It was also pretty clear that they had not picked a successor, whatever the state of play in Waltz's departure was. An organized White House would announce the successor immediately. And the fact that they didn't have a successor showed they weren't ready to make the announcement. And to have Marco Rubio serve on an interim basis is just absolutely bizarre. I mean, compare this with Richard Nixon in the depths of Watergate, almost about to lose his job. He loses William Rogers as Secretary of State. He nominates Kissinger because he knows he can get Kissinger confirmed. There's only one Henry Kissinger, and then serving through Nixon's resignation. What kind of look is that for the Trump administration?
I mean, also, Lara Loomer, who's a MAGA influencer, had been in the Oval Office with a list of people she thought the president should fire. A number of Mike Waltz's people around him were part of that group who actually got let go before this. I don't know if this is a victory for her as well. You've been critical both of Waltz but also Pete Hegseth as defense secretary. I mean, Waltz at least has a background in what he was working on as national security advisor. Does it surprise you that Hegseth, who actually shared sensitive information on Signal about an imminent military operation, is still in that position?
Well, I think he's a dead man walking, too. I think they don't want to have two go at the same time, so I think Hegseth has more time. And we don't know exactly what influence Lara Loomer had in Mike Waltz's departure, but if she had any, this really is the inmates running the asylum. I mean, the notion that a person like that can have any influence over presidential personnel decisions.
Well, I mean, she wanted the NSA.
Just extraordinary.
The NSA head out, and he was let go.
Yeah, that's extraordinary too. I mean, I think this is a point where I disagree with some of the analysts on what was the real cause of Waltz going, because I think it also says something important about Trump. People say with great confidence, oh, well, Waltz wasn't in tune with the president, and that's why he had to go. Well, who hired Waltz? I mean, who knows who's in tune with the president better than the president? This shows Trump has no philosophy, no national security strategy, doesn't do policy. He hired Waltz and many other people because he expected fealty from them. And when Waltz exposed Trump to political liability because of the Signal group chat, that was all Trump needed. That was not sufficient fealty. That's what the cause of the departure is.
This is par for the course. I mean, this is exactly what you experienced, what you saw during the first administration in terms of how Trump makes decisions, particularly involving national security, foreign policy.
Yeah, these are random neuron flashes. This is not Trump
Wow.
playing three-dimensional chess, as his
Wait,
advocates
random
say.
neuron
This
flashes?
is Trump.
Wow.
Yeah, this is Trump playing regular chess, one move at a time, and no further ahead than that.
That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, well, I must say it was a struggle to try and keep the wheels of government moving in the Trump administration. That's why I compared it to living inside a pinball machine rather than making coherent national security policy.
Ambassador John Bolton, thanks for being on. Perspective now from former Middle East and North Africa coordinator of the National Security Council, Brett McGurk, who served in senior positions under the last 4 presidents, including President Trump during the first term, and former senior advisor of President Obama and CNN chief political analyst David Axelrod. So, David, does the vice president's claim that Waltz is being promoted? I mean, you had Ambassador Bolton, who's been the U.S. ambassador to the UN, saying it's not a promotion. Does it pass the laugh test?
It does not. I think it reflects the political need they had to, the president dispatched so many national security advisors in the first term that I don't think they wanted to concede that this was what it was, but it is. And, frankly, I haven't heard the president elevate the position of the United Nations ambassador recently. He doesn't think that much of the United Nations. They want basically Waltz got waltzed out of town to New York and out of the action. But I want to say one other thing, Anderson. Listening to John Bolton discuss this, the job of a national security advisor, and Brett is much more tuned to this than I am, but is to organize the national security process, to bring together a consensus among the various national security agencies. But the word process and Donald Trump just that doesn't go together. And it's whoever is in that job, and we'll see how Secretary Rubio fares in the interim, has to respond to the firing neurons, as Ambassador Bolton just said. That is really disconcerting because you want a considered process. You want agencies to be working together and coordinated. And if you can't do that, it puts the nation at risk, I think.
More on that breaking news out of the White House. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, according to sources, is expected to depart his post after he inadvertently added a journalist to a private chat on the messaging app Signal in March. The Wall Street Journal reports that since then, quote, senior U.S. officials said Waltz has been marginalized during debates on key decisions, namely starting talks with Iran over its nuclear work and brokering a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. I want to bring in Sabrina Singh, former Deputy Press Secretary for the Department of Defense. Also here with me, former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI and MSNBC National Security Analyst Frank Figliuzzi. Sabrina, how significant is it if you are the National Security Advisor and you've been marginalized?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're nearly past the 100-day mark of this administration. The fact that the National Security Advisor, if these reports are true, has not only been marginalized but potentially fired, it really begs the question of who is in charge of keeping America safe. And it's just part of a longer string of worrying developments that this administration has launched. The purging of these career officials from the Department of Defense, Department of State, firing those people who, maintain some of our nuclear sites, and now Mike Waltz. Again, this is all in the first 100 days of this administration. And I think Americans have a right to be concerned here, is if you're marginalizing the person in charge of the national security apparatus, who is the person looking out for America's safety and security? And that's deeply concerning. And so, as this story develops, I know everyone's following it, but that's something that I'm certainly worried about.
So, Frank, let me ask you about what a change can mean for a country's security, especially a voice that, by all accounts, was someone who gave a challenge, who had a different view, and in a normal administration would at least have sparked some conversation.
Yeah, clearly a president has the right to surround himself with people who have a similar worldview. The problem is when they they act contrary or offer some advice that the president doesn't agree with, and then they get dismissed for that. I think that's some of the backstory here. And I can tell you from a counterintelligence standpoint, concepts like instability, flux, change are not good words when you're linking them to national security. That field calls for stability, and the world is watching to see if we have our act together with regard to national security.
Just in the last hour, I spoke to Congressman Eugene Vindman, and he thinks that Mike Waltz might be just the first domino. Take a listen.
Signalgate was a major, major failure. I mean, really historic to have the National Security Advisor, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense involved in this kind of scandal that put American lives, certainly the mission, but American lives at risk. And so this is the start of accountability, but it's just a start. We need a full-scale investigation.
He says there have been a tremendous number of conversations just in the last 24 hours, even before this news came out, about a full-scale investigation, what might happen next. What are the questions that are still out there?
Look, whenever you have something like the Signal Chat scandal, you think damage assessment. It's not just about accountability and who did what, but who exploited that. And we've yet to see any evidence of a fulsome investigation to see if our allies or adversaries were part or privy to that conversation. And farther, how much Signal Chat has been used. We've seen reports that Hegseth has it on his office computer, his desktop. We've got to get to the bottom of that, and I don't see an end in sight to any investigative effort.
What we have here are people giving up on Trump. You have former Trump officials saying they do not trust him. They're quitting on this idea of Trump being trustworthy when it comes to the military, national security, the nation's secrets. And this is not always typical, guys. It isn't. You know, Donald Trump has all of these people who have quit on him, or in some cases he's fired them, and you know they've quit, or like who knows, people that are obviously no longer on Team Trump, coming out and saying, we can't trust this guy to run the military. We saw during the last election all the generals coming out and saying we don't trust him. There's going to be a mass exodus in the military. People are going to take retirement early and what have you type thing, right? Because Donald has demonstrated not only an ideological desire to use national security and use force to silence opposition within the United States, but he's also demonstrated a lack of competence, both in himself, but also in who he picks, and then the things they do. You know, the group chats and all that. And as noted there, the world is watching. This people forget this because the focus right now in international relations is tariffs, and rightfully so. It's the bigger story. But don't sleep on this reality here that if the United States continues to act fascistically, and if they continue to just willy-nilly text things to journalists and God knows who else, well, then other countries are not going to trust the United States. If you were the prime minister or president of a European country, and you were sharing information with the U.S., would Trump and Hegseth and all, would their actions make you less likely to share info? I think they would.